And our first live presenter is waiting for us online. I'm really pleased to be able to bring Gillian Flies to you today to talk about the work that she and her husband Brent Preston have done on their farm, the new farm, just outside of Grey County. You can throw a stone from Grey County into their farm, which is in Simcoe, outside of Creemore. And it is a story of positive change, and they have been working together and as individuals, as leaders in Canada, to promote organic and regenerative agriculture, and also to do the research that proves that it is a path forward. And Gil is currently president of the Canadian Organic Growers, and we met and had a really great conversation at the Feast on the Farm event that was hosted by the Culinary Tourism Association last September, and it got me very excited about the opportunity to have Gil speak at our event today. You will be able to read Gil's bio on the session card, so I'm not going to read it from the page. I am simply going to turn it over and say, welcome, Gil.
Getting here today, but I'm assuming we're all tucked in, and I appreciate your time this morning. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to talk for about a half an hour, and then I will leave 15 minutes for questions at the end in case anyone has anything specific. So this is so my husband Brent Preston and I are farmers, and one of the things I wanted to say about us is that we are not your traditional farmers. We have come to farming from a political background. So prior to starting the new farm, we worked in Africa and Asia for about 12 years, and subsequently in Trinidad for a year and a half around political development and human rights. And when we moved back to Canada, we really wanted to do something that was impactful here. And we looked around at some of the biggest issues that we were facing today, and they were, of course, global warming and climate change, obesity and human health, and the breakdown of rural communities. And we understood that the way we grow our food is at the core of all of these problems. So we decided to start a farm. So we bought this farm it's right on Highway 124, just before Maple Valley. And we decided that we're going to start an organic farm. So that's what we did. So we started an organic farm, and we grew it over 15 years. I guess this is our 16th year now, and we are pretty much all wholesale at this point. We started out in the farmers market in Creemore. We work with about 100 restaurants and about 20 retail stores, just to give you an idea of scope. And mainly now we do all different kinds of salad greens, and we do cucumbers. Those are our main products. So this is a picture of our farm today, which is quite different. Again, we have 100 acres, and we're right here on top of the escarpment. So, when we were farming, we'd been farming pretty successfully for about 12 years. This was in 2017. And we recognized that agriculture had a huge role to play in climate change mitigation. And some of these facts that were coming forward really made us pause and think about the way that we were farming. The first one is that even if we stopped 100% of CO2 emissions today, it would still take 200 years before we get back to the levels in 1970. And what that means is emission reduction isn't going to get us there as far as climate change is concerned. It's an absolute must. We have to mitigate our emissions, but we also have to start putting the carbon back into the ground. And agriculture is responsible for 12% of all agricultural emissions in Canada. And that's not including the whole food chain, the supply chain situation. That's just how food is grown on our farms. So in 2017, we also started looking into the Paris Climate Accord and the 4 Mill project. And if anyone is really interested in climate change, it's worth taking a look. So the 4 Mill project states that if we can increase carbon in agricultural soils around the world by 0.4%, or 4/1000ths, at that point in 2015, we could offset all of our current emissions. And if we could do greater than 0.4%, we could start putting carbon back into the ground and start taking it out of the atmosphere. And the interesting thing, the sad thing here is it's no longer just 0.4%. I think it's now, instead of 100% of emissions, it's something like 71. They released that in August. And the number on the right here of 197 is how many countries around the world have signed on to this Paris Climate Accord. And Canada is actually a leader in that and is coming out strong, as we'll talk later, on some of our climate targets, especially as it relates to agriculture. So the thing to keep in mind here, and the one concept that makes us really hopeful and inspires us to do everything we can on our farm, is thinking about carbon. So carbon is actually not the problem. We talk about carbon, you know, too much carbon in the atmosphere, and it's just that carbon is in the wrong place. It's actually very valuable when we keep it in the ground. It's what grows our food, and it makes the world grow and the ecosystem go around. So the problem with agriculture today is that most farming is degenerative. Most farming globally on the large scale is releasing carbon back into the atmosphere and breaking down our soil structure. This has caused about a third of farmable farmland to be lost in 40 years. So it's been desertified through poor agricultural practices. And this is it's happening at about a rate of around 30 million acres a year, or the size of England, every year becomes pretty much unfarmable. So in 2017, we started to discover this term regenerative agriculture. And we, as I mentioned earlier, and the reason I mentioned that we were activists and we came at this strong in a way to farm in a way that was really supportive of the environment, is we didn't know about some of these regenerative agriculture practices. And regenerative agriculture is basically, there's 4 principles here. So when you hear the term regenerative agriculture, what that means is farming in a way that leaves the environment better than you found it. And so the 4 key practices here are least disturbance. So you will, you really this gets down to no till. When you look at Mother Earth, anytime the soil is disturbed, or even in the crack of a sidewalk, you see something trying to grow. Again, living root, you plant a lot of trees, you keep stuff growing in the ground. Animal integration, interestingly, there's a huge discussion here around whether or not we should be eating meat, or to what level we should be eating meat. But the integration of animals into the farm ecosystem is hugely beneficial as you move to sequester carbon and increase soil health. And again, increase biodiversity, growing as many different kinds of things as you can. Because when you start to understand the soil, you start to understand that the roots of all these different plants have different jobs, and the exudates that are under the soil from growing these different things all work together to create a healthy ecosystem. So I'm going to show you what that looks like on our farm and what we've done to align with those regenerative practices. The first thing we've done is we've certified organic. So when people want to know about regenerative agriculture, the first thing that we say is that organic is the surest way right now in Canada to ensure that your food is grown in a regenerative way. Many of these regenerative practices are included in the Canadian Organic Standard. It is the only standard that is audited annually and certified. So for us, if you start looking about this, the main thing here is that you have no chemicals in organic agriculture. And so you're focusing on the soil life and keeping that microbiology alive. We like to say that, farming conventionally is farming using chemistry, and farming organically is farming using biology. So one of the key practices in organic agriculture, and one that we use on our farm, is cover cropping. And this is in place of using nitrogen fertilizer. We have never used a single gram of nitrogen fertilizer on our farm, and we don't need it. Cover crops are a crop that you grow, you don't grow it to harvest, you actually grow this to feed the soil. So we have sort of 14 different plants, actually the sunflowers are on display here, but we have all kinds of legumes in here as well, which capture atmospheric nitrogen and store it down into the soil and make it available to our plants the next year. So we're working on our farm to have a very closed loop. We don't bring in general, we don't bring in outside fertilizers. We do bring in a little manure, cow manure from a friend down the road just for our greenhouses, but that's all we bring in. Otherwise, it's all through this kind of fertility here. We also plant a diversity of crops. So we have rotations now where we have our ground in cover crops for 2 years in a row. And then we circle through different lettuces, spinach, arugulas, kales, mustard greens, and we rotate all of these crops through. So the same thing is never following the thing that grew before it. And we have, we planted also lots of sort of things around the edges for our honeybees and our pollinators. And we try to have a really healthy ecosystem around here. We've also planted about 12,000 trees on our farm. And we have these windbreaks. And I wish I had included a picture here from this winter because it's really amazing how it holds snow back as well and keeps, snow in the different fields where it belongs. But the wind is, it's really important in the summer to also have a windbreak. And it is a corridor again for the wildlife and the pollinators and everything else. We've noticed a huge increase in our fertility given the windbreaks that we've planted. And a couple of years, I guess 3 years ago now as well, we've started to integrate animals. So we actually don't own our own cattle. We custom graze these cattle, these cows, actually. It's often mothers and their calves. We get about 20 of them. And for us now, we used to till in our cover crops on rotation. And instead, we now rotate these cattle through, and they actually eat all of the cover crop and give us direct fertilizer in the same space. So we have a practice here called rotational grazing. It's sort of a high intensity form of grazing. We move them every day or two into smaller areas on our farm where they eat everything down to the ground and then move on. And they're also fertilizing as you go on. So we're attempting to regenerate our whole farm and build soil organic matter, even though we only grow on the front 20 acres. And here's the biggest aha for us. So it's really also quite embarrassing to tell this story as a farmer, as an organic farmer, because that's my husband Brent on the tractor there, and we grow mainly salad mixes. And especially because we're high up or right at the top of the escarpment, it's really hard to grow warmer weather stuff up here. So a crop for us takes about 4 weeks to germinate and grow to a size that we can cut it. So we would rotate through. The way we would do it is we would plant our greens, and then we would harvest them, and we would till the ground, wait a couple of weeks to get rid of all the stubble, till it again, plant, harvest, till, etc. So sometimes we would be tilling about 10 times in a single season to manage weed and bed prep. And so we had a huge moment a few years ago. There's a lot of details on it. I did a TEDx talk on it called Climate Change, We Can Eat Our Way Out of This Mess, if anyone's interested in details around that. But I'll talk about a few of them here. We have now stopped tilling, we almost altogether. We're tilling on a 4-year rotation, actually on cover crop only, not our salad greens. And if you see on the right here, after we harvest a bed of salad big greens, we now put a tarp over it to solarize those greens and break them down. So here's a picture of what that looks like. On the right, you'll see a bed of salad greens those are mustard greens that have been cut. And on the left, we now throw a tarp over the top to solarize them. And the thing that is just shocking to us is that after 2 weeks, here's what it looks like. So you pull back that tarp and you find that it is ready to plant right into. And the coolest thing about this is that when you have the ground covered, it's also solarizing the weeds. So it germinates basically every weed seed that's in the top of that seed bed, and they start to grow and they die under that tarp. So when you get your actual crop, you can see here, this is the same field. On the left is the bed that was planted on the same day under that tarp. And on the right is the greens that were planted that had been in tilled soil. So you really notice a difference around that. I'm going to talk about why in a minute. So the first thing that when we talk about this is it's about soil structure. So this is just a picture of a random field, and you can look out your window and see many, many fields around here that look like this. And the reason that the water is pooling on this ground here is a very poor and broken down soil structure. And this is based on something called soil organic matter. And soil organic matter is the way that you measure the health of the soil. And it's directly related to how much carbon is sequestered in your soil. And so you're kind of on a scale like a general average of farmland in Ontario is somewhere between 2 to 3% probably. Our neighbor's field, for example, is at 1.5%. They've really broken it down. And through the years on our farm now, through these practices, and again, you have to think about the fact that we only stopped tilling in 2017 as much. Some of our fields are already up to 6% organic matter. And the reason that that's important here is that, for example, when we have a big rainstorm, for every 1% of soil organic matter that you increase through good farming practices like no tilling and cover cropping, you can absorb 25,000 gallons of water per acre in a storm more for every 1%. So say we're 4% higher than our neighbor across the road. That means for every acre, we can absorb 100,000 gallons of water in these crazy storms that are coming through, and their fields get washed out. It can't handle it. So it lands on the top, there's dry, broken down soil, and it just runs off everywhere. So as farmers are facing this climate chaos going forward, not tilling not only continues to keep moisture in the ground, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but it also allows you to really absorb the rain when it comes in heavy and fast volumes. What this means for us and for farmers is that sometimes we can be on our field up to a month earlier than our neighbors. And for a farmer, as you know, that's huge. So there's no waiting for all the water and the runoff and stuff in the spring to come in. We go straight onto our field and can begin planting. Now, an interesting question, I'm going to head you off at the pass because I know you saw those black tarps. And the question is if you are, firstly, does plastic break down into the soil? The answer is we only keep the tarps on for a couple of weeks, and the testing that has been done around this in the soil does not show any of that breaking down. And another question is that, does it get too hot for the life in the soil and under those tarps, and is it detrimental in that way? And so we actually had a few Ecological Farmers Association worked with us, the FAO, to conduct several on-farm research trials around this. So this little toy here in the middle is a sensor that my husband was obsessed with because you stick it in the ground and it sends data on temperature to your phone every hour on what it is doing under that tarp. And the thing that we discovered, so we tested 3 kinds of tarp. We did the black plastic, we did a landscape fabric, like a heavy grade 3 mil landscape fabric, and we did just plain tilled soil. The crazy thing for us was that the tilled soil was 6 to 9 degrees centigrade warmer than under those tarps. And the reason for that is because all of the water the moisture had evaporated out of that soil. So we ended up choosing and now use the tarping because even though it was, even though it didn't do exactly as like it didn't solarize the weeds 100% like the black tarp does, but it actually lets water go through into the soil, which we felt was really important. And it works like a charm. And you can buy that from Gintech, which is a company in Canada down by Kitchener. So again, here, I just want to point out, this is again, another model of using landscape fabric. So these greens were planted on the same exact day. It's the same lettuce. So this is just after 1 round of not tilling in between. So if you look at on the left, that extra moisture in the soil, the lack of weeds, and you can see on the right, again, the germination is a bit spotty due to the moisture, most likely. And also you're breaking up that mycorrhizal fungi, which really needs to feed the roots of these plants, right? So you break up that network when you till and you don't when you don't till. And this was pretty crazy for us because it really screwed up our whole production. Our salad mix was also ready to cut a full week earlier. We almost had no weeding to do, which as an organic farmer saves you a ton of money. And it was really had a great shelf life. So again, integrating these kind of regenerative practices really increased the profitability on our farm. And I'm happy to talk about this, but we aren't paying for inputs. We have higher yields. We have that ready sooner, so we can put an extra rotation through our same amount of land. And it's great. So you may have heard of this regenerative organic certification. It's called the ROC. It's a new certification that has been developed by the Rodale Institute and Patagonia down in the States. And we started certifying to this level in Canada in September of last year. And the way that it works is you have to certify organic first, and then you can certify to 3 different levels of this standard. There's bronze, there's silver, and the gold standard. And the interesting thing here is that when you get up to the silver and gold standard, you also have to get certified for not just soil health, which is the bronze, but social fairness and animal welfare on top of. It's a higher standard than even the organic standard. So one of the things that we actually did when we talk about, so I want to say here, we just, as of 2 weeks ago, became the first vegetable farm in Canada and the second in North America to be certified regenerative organic to the silver level or any level, quite frankly, but we're at the silver level on our way to gold. We're just working through our social fairness and animal welfare certifications. The social fairness we've been approved for. And since we don't have animals and we borrow them to custom graze, we're just working through that process now. But when we talk about social fairness, what that means is the farmer actually has to make a living wage. All of your workers have to make a living wage. Their accommodation has to be above average. There's all kinds of things that you have to have included. But when we're focusing on social fairness, we also talk about community. And one of the things that's been really important to us is we built an on-farm kitchen to invite our community in. This is what it looks like. It's super green. We built toward the German passive house standard as best we could. And we host events here to bring the community in. So we do, and we always link some form of education to the events and awareness about this type of agriculture and climate. We have school groups as well come up and really get their hands in the ground and start to understand that there is hope. And the main driver for our farm here is that we still have an opportunity to turn this around. It's really exciting, the role that agriculture has to play in helping to put this carbon back where it belongs and quickly. And so we want to inspire kids to understand this and give them agency to feel like they have change to help make a difference, because a lot of kids don't. We also have educational dinners on the farm that are fully regenerative, zero waste. What does it look like to do an event and an educational event that every single decision is the right one rather than being based on, profit or any other thing. And in the end, of course, you do come out more profitable and you win. This is what one of those events looks like on our farm. So the other thing that we do, and some of you, I hope, have maybe even been to some of these events, we have an annual fundraiser. We created a program with Community Food Centers Canada called Farms for Change. And this is our 13th year of this. We've raised over $1.5 million in funding, and all of that money is used to send organic local vegetables to good food organizations in and around Toronto. And we started out working with the Stop Community Food Center. And as of last year, we were sending vegetables to 15 different good food organizations that work with all kinds of marginalized groups in and around Toronto, Hamilton, London, you name it. So that's a really exciting program. And our event this year is June 18th. And Brent and I also have gotten very political, kind of going back to where we started. So I am the board president of the Canadian Organic Growers, and Brent is currently the board president of the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. Both of these groups are really great groups to join. Membership is very cheap if you are interested in being part of this solution. COG, interestingly, is working very hard to transition farmers to organic and also organic farmers to regenerative organic. We have really interesting programs that we're working with Riverside and Nature's Path, two very progressive food organizations who are trying to transition their farmers so that their farmers can be more resilient going forward. And we're also working very heavily on cover cropping, and EFAO as well does all kinds of farmer-led research and training programs for new farmers, which are really excellent. So together, we recognize these groups are incredibly important, but if we wanted to make big change, we recognize that policy, no big change happens without policy change. And so in order to affect policy, we need to be national and we need to be bigger. And although COG is a national organization, it's also very organic focused, and organic agriculture is only around 5% of agriculture in Canada. So we needed to build a coalition of farming organizations representing all walks of farmers interested in being part of the climate solution. And we've come up with Farmers for Climate Solutions, which is really great. So COG and EFAO and 3 other organizations started out putting together this coalition. We now are, I've lost my slide here. I got it in the wrong order. It's now 24 farming organizations representing 20,000 farmers, almost 24,000 farmers now with the new organization across Canada, who have come together to advocate for climate-friendly agriculture. And it's been hugely successful, which is really exciting. So we started looking at some of these issues. And when we put together this coalition, we started to put together some really amazing task forces around, GHG modeling and investigating what the Canadian government is doing. And I wanted to show you these numbers because it's really shocking, actually. When you look at how government is investing in climate-friendly agriculture, the European Union on average is $51.75 per acre. The US, even under Donald Trump, this was when this number was taken, was $8.47 per acre. It's gone up under President Biden. And Canada was 70 cents per acre, which is appalling, really focused on export focused and growing food as cheaply as possible and making it a commodity. That is actually changing. The government is working hard to start looking at these issues. And Farmers for Climate Solutions is having a really great relationship and a pretty big impact. So, we started out going to them with this idea here is that we have to bring down agricultural emissions if we're going to meet our 2030 targets. And so when we put together this really highly experienced task force, which if you go to Farmers for Climate Solutions website, you can Google that, you'll see who is on it and you can see the full reports. But we came up with recommendations that for the first budget, which was in April of 2021, of course, this coalition's only been around 2 years ago. We started it, we actually launched it on Agriculture Day 2 years ago because we looked at the government's agricultural program for their conference and there wasn't a single farmer. It was McDonald's, the Retailers Association, Syngenta. It gives you an idea of how agriculture is being viewed in Canada. So we launched on that day. And by the first budget, we said, here are 6 things you can do immediately. You can see here how much GHG mitigation we can achieve, how much that's going to cost, and how much money we need, which is $300 million. So here's what we came up with. The practices that have the biggest impact on carbon sequestration and building resiliency in farms. Number 1 is doing more with less nitrogen. We have to manage how much nitrogen fertilizer is being used in Canada. So nitrogen management. The second one is increasing the adoption. It goes hand in hand, increasing the adoption of cover cropping. Thirdly, normalizing rotational grazing, which is huge. These are the 3 biggest hitters here for GHG reductions, emission reductions. Also, protecting wetlands and trees on working farms is huge. This is where a lot of the carbon is stored. And powering farms with clean energy, which is also really important when you look at how much diesel is being burned on farms. And we threw in a last one here that we really need to celebrate some of these climate champions because there are a lot of farmers who are doing some really amazing things. Again, this is what's hopeful. It's like watching dominoes tipping over because when one farmer sees how profitable and how resilient other farmers can be by implementing these practices, there's a lot of over-the-fence education going on right now. So the very exciting thing in that first budget, we'd asked for $300 million. And they put $270 million into that budget and actually cut and paste in our recommendation and our research right into the budget, because it just didn't exist before. And so our hope is to actually be a trusted advisor and to work with government to be able to come up with really good spending to support farmers. Farmers for Climate Solutions at the same time got funding from a private foundation to train 10,000 farmers over 4 years across Canada on these 3 practices, which we're rolling out in a pilot phase already. So the first trainings are starting on nitrogen fertilizer management, cover cropping, and rotational grazing. We're training farmers who are already doing it to train their peers. For those of you interested in receiving this training this year, you can contact EFAO because they're the delivery partner in Canada. And again, yesterday, I was just really excited to share, government has announced they're adding another $470 million into this program for those 3 practices. They're also adding $300 million for clean tech and $100 million for more research in this area. So I think I'm right here at 9:45. And I might leave it there and just kind of leave it open for questions. So that's what we're doing here on our farm. And, it's really exciting. I'm hoping there's some farmers in the room today. And if not, there's some consumers who look for farmers that are growing this way to support them. But we're making real headway, and government is coming on board, and we're really excited where this is going. Thank you. Yeah.
That's great. I don't know if I'm back yet. Yes, I'm back. Gil, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation because it covered so many different areas, and it tied together your local action and your global vision and the vision of the organizations that you're involved in. So I invite our participants to send questions. We do have 15 minutes where we can pick Gil's brain and access that expertise. I've got a couple to start. So Gil, at the beginning of the presentation, you talked about one of your motivators being, you talked about equity and justice and the fact that you came out of political, but you also mentioned nutrition. So my question is, can you speak to the nutritional difference, if there is one, between crops that are grown through regenerative agricultural practices and those produced under conventional practices?
Yeah, so the science has not yet caught up to, or the studies have not yet caught up to what we're seeing on the ground. Yeah. There are a number of studies underway that are showing that there is a higher nutritional content in food that is grown in a regenerative organic way than is grown in a conventional way. And we're thinking that what it looks like to us is that you have the microbiome in the soil, which, as everyone knows, not everyone knows, people are discovering that it really is linked to the microbiome in our human gut. And so when you have a food system, humans are designed to get 95% of their nutrition from the soil. And so when you break that down by killing the life in the soil and processing food in a way that it's irradiated and washed in, chlorine and all of these things, you are disrupting that chain between the 2 biomes. You're not allowing those nutrients, that the living nutrient, biome into your guts. And the way that you actually grow plants in the soil, they can only access nutrients like boron and zinc and magnesium from 1 millimeter around their own root. You have to have a mycorrhizal fungi network connecting into those plants in order to deliver the nutrition into the plant. And so when you break that down repeatedly, you're not getting the highest level of nutrients into your vegetables that you can. We're noticing that as well, like the shelf life of our salads are incredible and have increased notably since we've stopped planting in tilled soil, for example. And so you can tell by the color of the plant and everything else. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I do have a couple more questions. One, a confirmation. Can you share a link or at least confirm the company name to where to purchase your permeable fabric and what that product is specifically called? It says, I believe she mentioned Gentech. So do you want to just confirm that for us?
Yeah, it's Gintech, Gintech. You can Google it. I will have to share a link. It is the 3 mil row cover. You could honestly just ask them what the new farm uses. They get people asking them that question. Just ask them that. The 3 mil, it's not row cover. That's our salad greens, but it's the 3 mil landscape fabric. That's what it's called. And it's heavier than your traditional one that you'd buy somewhere like Hamilton Brothers. That's lighter. And that does not work as well. And God forbid, if a deer walks across it, it's wrecked, right? So the 3 mil has a bit more, little animals and stuff can walk across it. And, we've been using ours for years and it looks like new, which is also really great. Yeah. And Gintech will sew the edges and they will sew pieces together to make it as large as you, or as small as you want, as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Now I'm curious to think about alternatives to plastic in the future, specifically with Canada Plastics Pact in mind, and perhaps that's another conversation, but I'm imagining maybe a future where we're using latex sheeting from rubber trees as an agricultural product.
Or what lived there?
I have another question. I just want to acknowledge that was a question from Herschel Scheth at Ontario Farmland Forum, and we are going to have a short video from them coming up later on in today's program. And I have one now from Melissa Schneider. It says, can regenerative agriculture have an impact on erosion, specifically around Lake Erie shoreline in the areas that can still be farmed there?
Again, I'm not an expert on this, especially I wish Brent was here as my husband. So Brent is currently the acting director of Farmers for Climate Solutions as well. I'm going to venture a yes, because erosion is one of the key things that regenerative agriculture deals with. And it would deal with that through, targeted planting of trees, some specific biodiversity, leaving margins between waterways and wetlands and where you're actually growing. So again, if you wanted to email Farmers for Climate Solutions, you can go to their website. I'm sure they could have an answer for you, but I would be guessing. But my guess would be yes. Thanks. There's really amazing projects that have gone on in Ethiopia and Egypt and China. If you just Google regenerative agriculture and those places to see where they've actually brought full deserts back and waterways from unusable to thriving communities and growing food, which is really exciting.
Great. Thank you. I invite more questions. I don't have any in the hopper right now, but now is your chance. Get them to us and we'll be able to put them forward. I would like to take a minute though, because Gil, another thing you mentioned was around tree planting and cover cropping and the value that has in terms of keeping snow from blowing and retaining moisture in the soil. So I just want to give a little shout out to a program that Grey County has recently adopted as starting this year. We have a natural snow fence program now, and if you go on grey.ca and simply type natural snow fence program into the search bar, you will get a downloadable document that tells you about the program. Grey County is assisting producers by incentivizing farmers to both keep corn on the ground if they grow corn, a set number of rows and at a set distance from the roads to trap that snow and sequester that carbon at least through that season, and also to enter into contracts with the county and county partners to plant trees for a 21-year period. So as I say, the information is available on grey.ca. It's called the Natural Snow Fence Program, and it is new, and we really want to encourage farmers to participate in this coming year. So I'd
love to just add one quick thing to that, because when we talk about this money being released, the 270 million at the beginning and then the 400, this is also to pay farmers to cover crop, rotational graze, and implement nitrogen management plans, which will be super helpful with the cost of nitrogen fertilizer. And Ontario Soil and Crop Association is doing all of those that flow through funding coming up. So if anyone's interested in getting paid to implement those services, there's good funding available actually for that.
Yeah, OSI are great program delivery partners for sure.
Yeah, great.
I have another question here. It's not attributed, but what do you see in the future for Farmers for Climate Solutions? I know this is kind of a Brent question, but you're close to it, so maybe it's aspirational. And what do you think the work is going to look like moving forward as you achieve your initial goals and as the goals in the organization grows? And also, as an adjunct question to that, how can general citizens get involved with the organization?
Great. Okay, so the easy one first. If you go to Farmers for Climate Solutions website, you can become a member. You can take a pledge, and then you become listed as a member, which is it's free. But what it allows us to do is count numbers of people's voices we can take forward to represent a government, which is super helpful. Our work going forward, so I'm heavily involved in the farmer training portion of Farmers for Climate Solutions, so I'll speak to that first. So the first thing that we're doing is we're rolling out a training program for farmers, by farmers, for 10,000 farmers. And now our next step to that is we have just been funded to train agrologists for extension. So we are hoping to train 1,000 agrologists to be on hand to provide continued guidance, because I think everyone knows in Canada, any farmer knows for sure there's a real lack of access to any extension agents and that kind of education. So in that training, we are planning on doing that, but then we are really looking at pushing that training back into our member organizations rather than necessarily doing it as a coalition, and continuing to focus mainly on policy, and which was our initial goal. And as far as the policy work goes, what we're working on right now is we've just released, which are on our website, a suite of recommendations around what needs to change for the business risk management programs, that suite of BRM programs, which are not currently supporting climate-friendly agriculture, and so how they could change in order to do that. And our big goal right now, we have another task force working on recommendations around the agricultural policy framework, which is like the CAP funding. It's how government delivers funding support to agriculture in Canada. And that's our huge focus right now. So the problem is we can't do this fast enough. So when the APF comes out, there's still going to be a lot of continued pressure that needs to be put on. It's going to require more than one program if this is going to happen. We're probably going to be looking at, the possibility or viability really of carbon credits for farmers, if that will work or not. And we're going to continue to pressure. So for example, if you actually look at this exciting report that came out yesterday, where they released the 470 million for climate friendly agriculture and 300 for tech, at the bottom of that report, they're saying they're only expecting a 1% decrease in agricultural GHG emissions, which is very depressing. They should be expecting way more, and really moving towards achieving way more than that. So we are going to continue pressing for that. And that's going to be our role for the foreseeable future, I think.
Great. Thank you. Gil, I believe you have a meeting to jump out to. So do you have time for one more question, or is this going to have to be it?
No problem. I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
Okay. So this is from your neighbor, Peter Zodke. Congratulations on your success at setting your high goals and achieving them. We note that regenerative farming has become a claim of many, but it's so loose that it might be becoming watered down. So, for example, grass-fed or pastured livestock is a claim by many, but without daily rotation, it isn't regenerative. So what would you want to say about the importance of seeking certifications to back up farmer claims? Specifically, is it worth the investment for farmers to seek the certification?
Okay, so the first thing, Peter, is you are 100% right. The watering down of the term regenerative is spreading, it's growing, and it's really disappointing. There's big companies coming in that are using regenerative. I don't need to flag any names here, but claiming that they're going to have 100% of their farms, regenerative within so many years, but regenerative them is implement one practice, which may include a soil test, for example, which really doesn't do anything. And so for us, and especially as you can see, we're certified regenerative organic. I'm also the board president of the Canadian Organic Growers. It's a certified standard. So we absolutely believe that farmers should certify. We also believe that government should support this certification in a way of paying farmers for ecological services. So don't necessarily believe that this weight should always fall on the shoulders of farmers to pay these fees. But for us, it's very important to certify so that our customers know that we are doing exactly what we say we are doing, because many of these people, there are of course farmers who are especially smaller scale who make an organic claim that are practicing organically, but you can actually never really know unless you know your farmer and you're seeing what they're doing. So yes, it's worth it. Our price, you're actually required to raise your prices when you certify regenerative organic. And I'm telling you, for oats and stuff, we have companies paying to transition their farms because there's going to be so much consumer demand that's already starting. And you can't find it anywhere. So we've been able to increase our prices, and we know that all the oat farmers that we're currently transitioning already have buyers fighting over their product at the new price, which is above what you charge for organic. Hope that helps. I hope that was the answer to your question.
Yes, thank you. Gil, thanks. This has been an amazing presentation and a fantastic way to start our day. I wish you an excellent rest of your day. I hope you can join us for some of the sessions later. You are, of course, welcome to join us, and if not, watch them again online as with the other participants. Thank you again. This has been an excellent way to get our day started.